so this is the fun side of full-time RVing. For every awesome view or awesome video or awesome hike, there is also those times like this when you get those unexpected things. All I was doing was coming out to pull the handle to dump the gray tank from the kitchen sink, and I noticed some water dripping off the cable from coming out from under the underbelly and dripping off the cable. So obviously there shouldn't be any water coming out from under the underbelly. So I pulled all these screws down and tried to peel the Coroplast down enough to where I could get a flashlight in there and see. And there was a little puddle of water, and dropped it down a little more, dried it off, and it appears our kitchen gray tank has a very tiny crack starting in it. So we're like 15 miles from a Walmart out here. That's the campground that we're at. So I went 15 miles into town. I got some JB Weld plastic weld. There you go. See the water draining out of it now. That's just coming off the underbelly. But and then I figured the easiest way to approach it would be just to cut a little access so that I can get up to the underside of the where it's cracked. The benefit is there was a recall for a Molex connector issue to be tied up, so I've got that connector right here. So this connector was laying on the underbelly, and the recall is for this to go into the dealership and for them to basically just zip tie this up on the frame so it's not sitting on the underbelly, so that if you get a water leak like we just got, you don't get water in the connector. I wasn't super concerned to get that recall taken care of, because my first thought is, well, you know, there shouldn't be any water getting in the underbelly. But obviously if you have an issue like this, you could very well get water in that connector. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that while I'm in here, tie it up. But this is what I'm looking at right now. So I've already cut the Coroplast out, and I just cut it on 3 sides and made like a little access door. And then there's the leak. Right there. There you go. So you can see that little split. So I'm going to drain the tank. I'm going to put some of the JB Weld plastic sealer on it and tie that connector up. And we'll give that. I'm going to try to not put any water in the sink for a few hours, let that set up. And then I'll just put some silicone on 3 sides of this door, and just silicone that back up, and should be in good shape. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Got my fingers crossed it's not a big deal, but this is definitely something I didn't want to just let ride, you know, for any longer than we had to. Definitely don't want that crack getting any bigger. So, all right, let's get it all sealed up and show you guys what the repair looks like when I get done here. All right, so I'm using the JB Weld plastic weld. I've actually used this stuff before to repair air conditioner cases, evaporator cases, things like that back in my previous life when I was a auto repair technician. I used the JB Weld plastic weld a few times, and it worked really good on stuff like that. So I'm really hoping that this stuff does the trick. So it just comes in the tube. You just squeeze it, and it puts out a 2-part epoxy mixture. So they even give you a nice little tray built into the package, so you can squeeze it in there and mix it all up good with your little stick they give you. And then once you get it all mixed good, just take a little bit of it and just smear it on there where you need it. I've never worked with this stuff overhead before, so this is a little bit different, but should be all right. Such a tiny little split. I don't know if we're gonna have to do something different with this down the road, maybe, but I would rather do that. If we have to do something with it, I'd rather do it when we get back to Florida over the winter time. I'll have a little better access to tools and things like that. So I'm just gonna put this stuff on kind of heavy all around where that crack is, try to reinforce it a little bit. So it sets up in about 5 minutes and it cures in an hour. So my hope is that this will seal this thing up for a while. All right, so it's time for the moment of truth. I'm about to slide under here, see how my little JB Weld plastic weld patch is looking, and then we're going to put some water in it and keep our fingers crossed that this does the trick. My little door I cut. All right, so here's my JB Weld plastic weld. Pretty dry, it's tacky, a little bit tacky. So I'm gonna let that dry for a little bit longer. It's supposed to fully set up in an hour. It's been about an hour and a half, and it definitely feels, it's not wet anymore. It's dry, but it's just a little bit tacky. So I'm probably gonna let that ride till after dinner tonight. Probably another, I don't know, probably another hour and a half to 2 hours. I really want that stuff to set up good. I think I have a suspicion as to what might have happened to cause that little crack. I mean, you saw how tiny it was. At our last harvest hose spot, we were walking back to the fifth wheel, and I noticed our spare tire was hanging down probably about 5 inches from where it is supposed to ride up tight against the frame. And I'm wondering if that wasn't coming up swinging. And I mean, the gray tank is right, I mean, it's right here. I can feel the bottom of it. I can feel the bottom of the gray tank right there. So I wonder if that tire wasn't swinging up and banging into that bottom of that tank. I don't know. It's just a real obscure and strange place to have a crack like that, and it's so tiny. It was such a tiny crack. So I don't know. I don't really have a good explanation. Hopefully I've got it patched up. You know, I don't know how long-term that's going to be. It's probably not a long-term fix, but it's definitely a temporary fix that'll keep it from dripping. I mean, you saw how tiny that drip was. I had probably 20 gallons or so of water in there, probably half full roughly, when I showed you guys the picture earlier of, you know, that little drip. Such a tiny little drip, but obviously it's something I want to take care of because it's just going to get worse. So I'm hoping that took care of it. You know, just another perfect example of, if you're going to embark on this lifestyle, full-time RV travel, you know, it's part of the deal. I mean, you're just going to have things like this you have to do. I mean, definitely was not planning on spending my afternoon chasing down some JB Weld plastic weld to fix our you know, kitchen gray tank. But you know, you can jump up and down and get mad and be all upset about it all you want, but at the end of the day, your tank's still going to have a crack in it. So you need to be able to kind of think on your feet, be a little resourceful, figure out a way to fix it. Even if it's not the greatest fix in the world, at least come up with something temporary to get you by until you can get to a spot where, you know, you can figure out a more permanent fix. I carry a pretty good assortment of tools with us. Not a tremendous amount, but a nice assortment. That way, when something like this happens, at least hopefully I have enough to where I can, again, patch this together, at least to get us to, you know, somewhere where we can get a more permanent repair made if need be. But looks like that's going to hold up. We're going to throw some water in it, keep our fingers crossed, and you know, hope for the best at this point. But I feel pretty good about it, since it was just a tiny little drip and it wasn't a full-on, you know, big crack. I feel pretty good about this one. All right, so we're out here the next morning. Time to see if our little patch worked. So I'm gonna slide under here, see if there's any drip going on. Man, I hope not. Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty dry. Well, there's nothing, it's not wet, so hopefully that'll hold up for a little while. Keep our fingers crossed and keep a close eye on it. I'm not going to travel with any water in this gray tank. I don't typically anyway, but I'm just going to make extra, you know, just make really sure to try to avoid traveling any water in this gray tank to put any extra stress on that. I mean, it looks pretty good, but definitely don't want to cause any extra stress. Right, so it looks like that took care of it. You know, again, it's part of the, just kind of part of the deal. You know, when you live in your RV and travel all the time, full time, you're gonna have little weird things like this happen. So luckily we caught it before it turned into a really big deal. Keep a close eye on it, and I've got some more epoxy if I need to do a little touch-up repair on it down the road. But so I'm going to take some silicone, and I'm going to put some silicone around that where I cut the coroplast, and then push it back up in place to just kind of silicone it back in place, and call it good for now. So thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you guys down the road, hopefully with no gray tank leaks.